Well, hello there. Welcome to the latest edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cooke, and just like Santa Claus, I've got a long list of items for you as we head into the Christmas season. We're going to talk about quite a few items that have to do with Richmond Municipal Council. This includes everything from volunteer fire departments and whether the county will help them out with dry hydrants, the new vaccination policy for municipal employees, how Richmond Council is tackling doctor recruitment, and concerns at local long-term care facilities. But we're going to begin by devoting the first half hour of the program to affordable housing. That includes an interview with Nova Scotia's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, John Lohr, who recently met with a number of municipal units, including Richmond Council and the town of Port Hawkesbury, to talk about the housing needs for each area and also some items in terms of his role as the Minister of Municipal Affairs. But we begin with a council conversation about a piece of infrastructure over in Evanston, the former West Richmond Education Centre, also known by many as Walter Fougere School. It could be a big piece of infrastructure in terms of local physician recruitment efforts, or for affordable housing, or perhaps even both. But what's going to happen to it in the meantime? Richmond Council had circled December the 20th, their latest regular council meeting, as a date in which a decision would be made on the school. So how did that conversation go? Let's take you to the latest virtual regular council meeting for Richmond County and hear how the conversation went and what happens to the school building next.
It was really just an expression of interest from a cooperative group of companies that included Locale Real Estate Inc., Collindale Business Solutions, Celtic Keys Property Management, and Hot Performance. They were kind of looking to just express their interest in the building and looking for council to sign, an expression of interest with them that would have them have exclusive use and permission to redevelop the property in line with our vision, which I think is still a little loose, but the point is that they would work with us to create a proposal that is in line with our direction. They do bring some expertise in housing developments and have been working in communities in this region on housing related issues. I also wanted to note that I did have a quick discussion about this, and I think Don, Councillor Digdon, and Councillor Brent Sampson, you were with us. We discussed this really briefly with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing when he came through on a tour. And he spoke about the use of inclusionary zoning to deal with properties like this that the municipality might own that would have specific use to address a social issue. Inclusionary zoning specifically it's a tool that we can use through our planning documents. So of course, we would have to amend our planning document that property is in the central zone. But what it does is it would require that a given share of new construction would need to be affordable by people with low to moderate incomes. If it was a housing development. So that's an option for us to consider too as we move forward, whether we tender this property or whatever it is we decide to do with it.
The meeting we had with the minister was great in St. Peter's, and he did shed a lot of light on, on the fact that, he said there was old fire departments that were in the areas that were redone over for turned into senior housing. And, he did make if I recall, his message was more or less, don't be in a rush to get rid of a building because you can't get it back, is pretty much what I got from, just because it's getting old doesn't mean it's gone. So I don't know, in taking what he said, I think we may still want to look at the development side. He also indicated that there was still funding. I think it was 50 to 75,000 per unit for a developer. So you got to remember, if you turn that into a 10-unit apartment building, that's almost $750,000 awarded from the government. So that might be a great initiative for the for the entrepreneurs or somebody in that field of expertise.
I think I find those comments interesting, but it's not like we've just gained possession of this building. So we've had possession of it a long time, and I mean, yes, we now have it. That the land is migrated, and now we are in a position to be able to to do something with it, or, put it for tender or whatever. But I think the expression of council prior to that meeting was that we want something to happen here, whatever that is. And I remain firm on that. We put the information out there. I think it's a big price tag for a community group to take on. I'm certainly intrigued by this proposal that was presented to us by the local real estate consultants, advisors, or whatever they're calling themselves. And I think they have some interesting expertise, and really all they're asking for us to do is chat with them. Now, that said, I think I remember last time we talked about this, and Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but that we aren't really in a position to have conversations about that if we are to put the property up for tender, that the tender has to be based on price. And although we may engage in a conversation with this group to talk about what our thoughts are, what we'd like to see happen with the building, it still wouldn't come into the decision-making process in terms of who perhaps would be awarded the building in a tender process.
I did read the 2-page proposal that those folks provided us. However, it doesn't line up with what we can and can't do with respect to the Municipal Government Act, and with respect to what the lawyers have indicated that we can and can't do. So I guess there are some funding opportunities out there that would be that would apply to business groups who would want to redevelop the property, and basically those folks can't fix it unless we sell it.
I totally agree, Don. Like, it kind of worried me that we would be based on an expression of interest, providing exclusive discussion. And so that was kind of, I think, where the hiccup is going to be for us in terms of making sure that we're in compliance with policy. I have to say, I really commend the group for expressing that interest, and I would encourage them to participate in whatever process we have going forward. But I think recognize that we're not really in a position to be exclusive in our approach here right now. Not, just because we need to be in compliance with legislation and policy. How we proceed in the future, once we've decided how we're going to proceed here, we can still be open to being participants in in whatever transpires on that piece of property, because I know there's a significant chunk of land there as well as the school building. So, I'm assuming now that we have a clear title and everything's migrated, that, we could potentially be looking at, tendering that in full or in parts. Like, is that an option for us?
Well, essentially the property, it's in two pieces. There are two actual PID numbers that are involved, and it would likely all go together. The front piece is obviously bordering the property, which provides the access to the facility, and there are some infrastructure issues there with respect to water and sewer, and there is also a access to a private dwelling as well. So those things would have to be considered and included in the whole parcel. Now, the piece itself, the boundaries on both sides of the building are very narrow, and there's not very much room there, and the vacant property exists in the rear of the building. So there really isn't much room there. So it would probably all go at the same time.
Okay. Yeah. Structurally, that would make more sense. Okay.
I don't think we're, in the rental business ourselves as a county. And I think I'd be in favor of, putting an RFP out there, putting a tender notice out there for the building. Odds are, there has been interest, I think Don said before, from somebody that, was possibly looking at, I assume it's housing, I don't know, but I think the odds are that somebody looking at it may be looking at housing, but we can't necessarily control that. We have to go with whatever the highest bid is. And
so that inclusionary zoning tool, that would enable us to have a little bit of control over that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I was going to go with it first. I would go with that inclusionary zoning tool first, and therefore I would, again, I recall, and maybe I misinterpreted, but we can't pick who's going to do it. But according to the minister, I was pretty sure we could definitely be on board with whoever was, if our goal was low income housing, well, then we can you know, steer it in the path of low income housing, more or less. I hate to see another building owned by the municipality go for peanuts. Is probably the best way to put it. We've had many in the past go that, you know, were $100,000 buildings, and I know there are surplus buildings at that point, and they may cost us a few dollars, but in the long term, you know, I think getting something that we require, that we really need, is much more beneficial than losing a couple dollars to sit on it for another month or two to, you know, have it rezoned or proper zoning that we may actually entice somebody.
I think the only thing I would mention to that, Councillor Digdon, is changing the zoning would likely lower the value of it, because all of a sudden then they have less options going forward as to what they want to do with it. And also, I don't know that we're going to look at a big payday out of this, because basically it's a liability, in the sense that we all know we're looking at, you know, likely over $2 million needed to be invested in the first 5 years. So I don't think we can look at this as some kind of a major cash grab selling this.
No, I would fully agree with that.
100%, but if I recall, that $2 million payday over 5 years was to more or less put it back into the same, you know, we don't need a cork floor for a gymnasium, and we don't need 30 skylights, and we don't need it. We need it back, you know, I guess weather tight, we need it functional, and we need it operational, but we don't, I mean, as a municipality, we really don't need it at all. It's not a building that we require, but I'm just looking at somebody that's taking it over. I don't believe the price tag is $2 million unless they're looking at turning it back into an exact same school as what they have now.
I would suggest, though, if you're going to turn it into apartments, that number is probably higher than what it would cost for a school, because your fixtures and so on would get, your cost of your fixtures and so on, and plumbing and everything else would get quite a bit higher. So I think the school end of it, returning it to that end, would probably be on the low end.
Except for every unit, the government is willing to give you $75,000 per unit to invest in.
I feel like I you know, I think at the end of the day, what we're getting into there is kind of the back end of, you know, once it's no longer ours, then, but I really, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of wondering if we should kind of more focus on what we want to achieve as council with this. And I think one of the things I would mention is, you know, kind of what's more important to us. Do we want to sell this quickly, or do we want to explore this opportunity for more affordable housing?
I like the idea of being able to somewhat direct what happens in that area. It actually is exactly what we were talking about trying to do when we were talking about tendering it previously, sort of saying, is there a way? But under the MGA, there isn't a way to do it, but this is a way to sort of, to be able to get the result we want, which is have it become the type of development this county needs while still following the MGA, right? And I would say, to your point, Brent, obviously putting in this inclusionary zoning could result in a lower payday for us, for lack of a better word. But I don't know that like, it's, how do you balance the monetary benefit versus the social benefit, right? And so I think that residents of Richmond County are looking for us to do a bit of both. But I feel like in this case, the social benefit outweighs the financial differential between if we had it and didn't. So I certainly would support the idea of referring it to EDPC and the Planning Advisory Committee and ask them for feedback on it. And specifically for the potential to develop housing opportunities.
I agree with Deputy Warden Nani. You know, I mean, if we can steer some of these groups in the direction that, of course, we've heard during our campaigns, where affordable housing is on the forefront, and it's always been on the forefront. It's going to be on the forefront for a long time now. And you know, when you look at you know, our county, and you look at the province itself, you look at former schools that have been turned into apartments and low income housing, right? So yeah, if you know, and again, I agree with the Deputy Warden. Sometimes maybe, you know, we have to take a little bit of a hit to make sure that the community benefits more than what our plan was to benefit monetary wise, right? I guess it's called a return on investment, right? So I'd like to see it steered in that direction if we could.
Okay, so you'd be okay then, Councillor Sean, if we referred this to Planning Advisory Committee and EDPC for further investigation?
Yeah, okay. For sure.
Councillor Digdon?
Yeah,
Did you
agreed.
Okay. Councillor Brent Sampson?
No, I think I'd rather see it just go to an RFP because I think we're gonna drag our heels on it, but that's fair enough. If the majority wishes to do that, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So then I guess at this point, I'd be looking for a motion to refer to Planning Advisory Committee on the Eastern District Planning Commission.
I'll make that motion to refer to the planning commission.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Could I have a second round of that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Warden. Any further discussion?
Question?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion is carried and an objection.
So as you can see, Richmond Municipal Council is going to need a little more time to figure out what to do with the former West Richmond Education Centre. But that doesn't mean they're not discussing it on the local level or that they're not discussing it with the minister responsible for municipal affairs and housing here in Nova Scotia. His name is John Lohr. He recently took a tour around Nova Scotia to meet with several municipal units to see how their housing prospects are looking, but also to talk about various issues that come with running a municipality. He talked to Port Hawkesbury and Richmond officials just a couple of weeks ago, and just a couple of days ago I had the opportunity to talk to Minister John Lohr himself. So let's hear that conversation right now. Minister Lohr, thank you very much for joining us on Telile 24/7 today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Adam, and I appreciate the invitation to be on your program.
That's no trouble at all. A big reason that we wanted to bring you on board is because you have been visiting municipal councils around Nova Scotia to get a better sense of what their needs are in terms of housing, but also to speak about various municipal issues with them. Now, you've brought your tour through the Strait area recently. We'll talk a little bit about that. But first of all, can you give me an overall impression about how these meetings have been going province-wide?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Adam, that the housing issue, I'm from Kings County, obviously. I know in the Annapolis Valley, the housing issue is in a crisis, really. But the reality is that's true virtually I think it's true in every community that I visited, whether it's down on the South Shore or in rural Cape Breton or CBRM or Halifax. There's a housing crisis. There's a concern about the cost of housing. And I'd say virtually every municipal council has raised or town has raised the issue with us on the tour. And you're right, we went through with my staff, with my senior staff. I traveled through Cape Breton. I have to look at my calendar to know that it was a week and a half ago. It's all a blur, but anyway, I do remember the meetings very well, and I did visit, meet with Richmond County Council, part of the council, and with the Port Hawkesbury mayor as well.
Well, let's talk about those meetings a little bit, if we could, Minister Lohr. And I want to begin with Richmond County, if I could. There is one specific piece of infrastructure that the county has been looking at developing, but overall, I want to talk to you about how you feel that meeting went and whether you feel like you learned something specific about housing needs in Richmond County overall. How do you feel that meeting went?
Well, I think that the meeting with Richmond County, with the Warden Amanda Mumberket, and there was several councillors at the meeting as well. It was in the middle of the day, so it wasn't necessarily an easy time for councillors to get to us, to meet. So I appreciate them taking time out of their busy days to come and meet with me. Certainly, they brought up the school, which is quite close to the hospital there in Richmond County, and they're concerned that that school, which is now empty, how could that be repurposed, and could it be used for housing? And I did direct them to contact my staff in municipal affairs and housing if they want to explore what the options were to do that and how that could be done and what possible funding there could be to do that. Certainly there is funding for affordable housing. And it's a matter of putting those projects together. And I'm not, I didn't visit the school, but we did a drive-by. I know you can't quite see it from the road, but I certainly saw the hospital and the school there, and there could be, their concern related to the hospital too. Frankly, they were concerned about where do doctors and nurses come in, or staff of the hospital, where do they live? So that's going back to the housing crisis. Like, how do we address if we're trying to recruit new people into our community, new healthcare professionals, where do they live? And that's a concern I've heard across the province.
Apart from the West Richmond Education Centre, which we've spoken about just a moment ago, what is your sense of how things look in terms of the need for affordable housing across Richmond County? Do you feel like you learned something from that meeting about that, even though it was very brief?
Well, I certainly did, and I know that they expressed their concerns that it wasn't just the old school and the hospital staff; it was also right across the Richmond County, and I didn't tour that or see it, so but I certainly heard their concerns.
Well, let's move on to Port Hawkesbury, because I understand that you actually met with Port Hawkesbury Town Council a little later that same day. Can you tell me a little bit about what you got out of that meeting? There are a couple of specific things I wanted to ask you about, but overall, what was your sense of how that discussion went with Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Port Hawkesbury Town Council?
We had an excellent meeting with Mayor Chisholm-Beaton and her, not her entire council, but most of them. And I have to say that they just and I'll give kudos to them. Of all the municipal meetings I've had so far, theirs was probably the best presentation. They had a PowerPoint presentation, and we saw a video of their trails. So, and they laid out it looked like that PowerPoint had been designed for the meeting with me. It was just laying out the issues that they were facing. And again, affordable housing was a major issue for them, among others, but it was just a very interesting and they were well prepared, I have to say.
Same question I'll pose to you about Port Hawkesbury as I did about Richmond County. What do you feel you learned about affordable housing and low-income housing needs in Port Hawkesbury from that presentation? Were there one or two things that really stood out for you?
Well, yes, Adam, definitely. They were very concerned about affordable housing and very concerned about the impact of the housing crisis on their community, and they are wanting to see more, just as Richmond County wanted to see the old school developed in particular. I would say Port Hawkesbury was very interested in seeing more affordable housing units built in Port Hawkesbury, and wanted to see the town grow and create the opportunity for those things to happen. That was very top of mind for them.
Now, I want to ask you, Minister Lohr, about the timing of this meeting, and in particular, just because it comes only a couple of months after you had stepped in with regards to a piece of green space in a community called Elm Court over in Tamarack Heights on the outskirts of Port Hawkesbury. The town had wanted to turn that into green space, and you had spoken to them saying that your office would not permit that to happen because of affordable housing needs for Port Hawkesbury. And I just wonder, could you take a moment or two just to explain what your reasoning was in stepping in that particular case involving Elm Court?
I mean, really, the reality is there's a shortage of serviced lots, building lots serviced with water and sewer right across the province. And with the housing crisis across the province and in Cape Breton and Port Hawkesbury, I just couldn't sign off and convert, and I can't remember the number, but 6, 7, 8 building lots into a green space when I knew they were serviced. And that costs money to service and provide water and sewer to building lots. So I just couldn't do that.
Do you feel that the land is suitable for affordable housing or low-income housing development? Some residents and a couple of town councillors have brought up drainage issues that have been occurring there for the better part of 15 years. Was that a concern for you as you looked at that, or do you feel that the land can be used for that purpose?
Well, Adam, what I can say is that if those lots were developed and serviced in the beginning, somebody thought they could be used for building lots. So other than that, I'm just going by what I knew.
Now, all that being said, Minister Lohr, when I spoke to the mayor and the deputy mayor hours after that meeting, their regular town council session was happening that night, they did speak very positively about the meeting they had with you. And it looks like in terms of the situation with Elm Court, they have learned a few things as well, and they're willing to move on to you. So do you get the sense that your department and the town council are ready to move forward on the affordable housing file together?
Yeah, I didn't feel there were, that was That's certainly not an issue for me moving forward. I made that decision. That's in the past. I'm looking forward. I was very impressed with the mayor and the council, and as I said, the presentation that I received. So I think Port Hawkesbury has a bright future, and that that decision won't be revisited. So that's in the past. We're, you know, so no harm, no foul. I'm an old basketball player, like,
Sure.
so no problem, right?
Okay.
And I think they're of that mindset too.
Just as we're wrapping up here, Minister Lohr, you got the housing file at a very important and volatile time for housing issues across Nova Scotia. Of course, we know of the situation in Halifax that occurred the day after your government was elected in August, where there was the removal of temporary shelters that had been set up on a street over there. But that being said, as you mentioned right off the top, you've learned going around in your tour with municipal units that it's not just in HRM that there is a problem. You mentioned your own constituency in Kings County. So do you get a sense that, having spent the time familiarizing yourself with the concerns of other communities, that you and your department can make a tangible move on this coming into 2022? Do you feel that you're ready to tackle it, not just in HRM, but all the way across the province?
Well, I feel, Adam, we had in one sense, we did a lot this fall to tackle housing needs, and some of those things will take a little bit of time to maybe show results. But I mean, we stepped up on the Affordable Housing Commission report and did more than that report had asked us to do. And there's more projects to be announced. And there's a lot more things to do. I have a mandate to look at land across the province that is suitable for housing and make that available. And there's a lot in my mandate on housing. So we did a lot this fall, but we have a lot of things that we're going to continue to do. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a privilege to serve as the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and I realize that nobody has their hand on the tiller for very long. So I want to make the best of every moment that I have to be the minister and get as much done as we can get done. And I have to say, my staff is working hard. I'm very pleased with that too.
That's a good way to look at it. Minister Lohr, we've covered a lot of ground in a short time, as I thought we might. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about all of this just before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate your interest, and I know the value of community TV, Adam. So to all of your viewers, I would say best wishes for the Christmas season.
And of course, we return those right back to you, Minister Lohr. We know you've got a lot on your plate, obviously. Thank you very much for taking some time for me and for Telile 24/7 today. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thank you, Adam.
No trouble at all. John Lohr is the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for Nova Scotia. We've been speaking to him via Zoom today. Stay tuned for more Telile 24/7 in just a moment. Now, we're going to stay with affordable housing just for a moment, because there was one other item from the Richmond Municipal Council table the other night that spoke about the possibility of new housing developments in Isle Madame. You might recall that SRD International tried to launch an affordable housing project this past spring in Isle Madame, only to run into trouble when it turned out they would have to have entirely new water and sewer hookups to be able to make it run, because the property wasn't going to be located near the existing Richmond Municipal water and sewer lines. But SRD International is trying again, and we're going to have a public hearing in January to see whether they can put forth a case that Richmond Council and the general public would appreciate in terms of affordable housing prospects for Arishat and the surrounding communities. So let's take a look at the discussion on SRD International's desires for affordable housing at the latest virtual regular council meeting for Richmond County.
And maybe I'm misreading it, or maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it sounds like that it's only, the development is only so that they can hook up to municipal and water. Is that correct?
Yeah, if it was a multi-unit dwelling, like from what we were explained during the committee meeting, single unit, family dwellings can be built within this zoning. However, multi-unit dwellings can't at the present moment. So this would change it in order to allow for multi-unit buildings to be able to be built there. However, one stipulation would be they would be required to be hooked up to municipal water and sewer. rather than the possibility of a cluster septic system.
So can we get clarification on that? If the building happens to be built in an area without water and sewer?
Then they wouldn't be able to do a multi-unit building. You could still do like as now with a single unit dwelling, but you wouldn't be able to do multi-unit buildings without it being hooked up to water and sewer. And part of the thought process was there during the discussions was just the possible environmental impacts with the cluster system, because it's in a watershed area. That was the reason this zone was protected.
Agreed. So I guess my question for District 2 would be if somebody wanted to build a multi-unit building in District 2 where there is no water and sewer.
They wouldn't be able to under this. They wouldn't be able to right now as it is, but you wouldn't be able to going forward unless it was able to be hooked up to water and sewer. As well as I think there was a couple other stipulations in there. Sean, was it not? I think there was something to do with outdoor oil tanks weren't allowed, and nothing for fuel storage over 25 liters. Because the concern is that, you know, this is the watershed area and the environment, the possibility of an environmental impact on the water system.
I guess the ultimate question for me is that if an entrepreneur or somebody wants to put a multi-unit building presently in District 2, are we saying that it's not permitted if we agree to this?
Well, I think it's not permitted now.
It's not all of
Right.
District 2 though. It would only be the
Just in the
areas that are zoned in that watershed, which is a large area, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, the concern would be the watershed area. Yeah.
My recommendation then to the people to the councillors on the committee would be with additional amendments, then maybe brought back to the committee and
Consider additional amendments to allow for multi-unit developments in the
well,
watershed
in
area
places where
District
water
2.
and sewer is not even an option.
Yeah, as long as it's outside of the watershed area, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think we have to make an amendment to this one, Mike. I think it's just, I understand where you're going in your district, just in case it does happen. But if it's out of a watershed area and environmental issues are
Yeah,
not
like,
affected.
you know, I have Rocky Bay, Jamrons Island, West Erie, any one of those areas would be shut down with by not ever being able to get water and sewer.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Councillor Digdon. So any further discussion? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Now, you might recall that earlier in the program we were talking about the former West Richmond Education Centre in Evanston and whether that property could be used as part of physician recruitment efforts because it's so close to the Straight Richmond Hospital in Evanston. Well, we're going to take another look at the possibility of a new physician recruitment strategy, one that was suggested by a medical student herself speaking to Warden Amanda Mumbercat. Let's go back to the virtual regular meeting of Richmond Municipal Council and hear Warden Mumbercat talk about what this strategy could involve.
So I was approached by a local healthcare professional who's furthering her education to become a nurse practitioner, and she wants to stay and practice in this area. So that's a win. It's very exciting when those contacts are made. She was asking if we had any financial support for education programs for people who would be willing to enter into what's typically called a return to service arrangement to practice for a minimum number of years in a particular area in exchange for financial support from that area. Now, I know that currently, and I let her know this, we certainly don't have any type of that kind of programming right now. I took another look at our grants policy and it wouldn't qualify because, we've got, a certain set of criteria there. So there wouldn't be an opportunity there. But I did want to open this for discussion by councillors to see if that's something, a direction we might be interested in going in the future. Maybe refer to budget, or if you think it's really not the field we want to be playing in. So really just wanted to open this for discussion at this point. So any discussion by council?
Yeah, for me, Madam Warden, I've said this for many years, before I became an elected official, I've always said it, when it comes to these health professionals, you know, we have to start investing in them. If they want to invest in us and invest in our county and go to university and get a degree and invest and return home, yeah, I'm all for that, and we should look into something like that in the future for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Sampson. Could I have any other thoughts, discussion?
Yeah,
It'd be just, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Deegan.
no, I just, you know, I guess I agree with Councillor Sean Sampson in the, you know, in part of our discussion with the ministers in St. Peter's, I believe that was one of them as well, that the, you know, for healthcare and recruitment, and, you know, I believe they even took what was it, a house or something that they turned into to help support nurses or whatever it was. And same deal, right? It's not always just financial. Sometimes it's housing. Sometimes it's, so yeah, it might be, I agree. You know, our budget is usually tight, but there might be somewhere that we can start to, you know, a little hand is better than no hand at all, I think. And
right. Okay, thank you, Councillor Digdon. Councillor Brent Sampson?
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with that as well, to bring that maybe to future budget discussions, because I think it is something that, you know, we probably, many of us heard on the doorstep, and it's a big issue right now, healthcare professional retention. And if we can make some kind of an impact on that locally, I think that's a good investment of taxpayer money.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Councillor. Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. In principle, love the idea, of course. I think it makes sense. Perhaps in anticipation of having that conversation at budget, perhaps we could direct staff to investigate what other municipalities are doing in regards to this, in terms of how are they ensuring like quality folks being part of the program, right? Because you'd also hate to support someone and then they are not successful, or like, what do the legal documents look like? It's sort of no need to recreate the wheel. We know it's being done in other locations. I feel like down in the Kentville area or something, they've had some successful like physician recruitment, which I suspect has spilled over into healthcare professional recruitment. So maybe we could encourage staff to connect with the Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health group, who could connect them to other municipal units who are doing similar work, so that, you know, if we started that work, you know, in January or February, then when we get into budget deliberations, we would already have some of the research done to know what that could look like, what that could cost us, and all those pieces. And I guess the second part I would say to that is, you know, in terms of how perhaps we could do things different, you know, that there's the opportunity to support people financially through their schooling, but there is also options to support folks in terms of having like housing or whatever. And again, I guess I want to say, you know, having attended Cape Breton South Recruiting for Health meetings and also the Straight Richmond Foundation board meetings, I know both of those groups are quite interested in pursuing something like that. Again, they've not solidified any thoughts in terms of what that specifically looks like, but they've already kind of agreed to have conversations about what it could look like if they work together. And so maybe if we work together with them, as you know, we may be able to be part of that group as well, if that's something that we're inclined to do through a budget process.
Okay. So that's great points, Deputy Warden. So I'm kind of hearing two pieces then. Let's defer this to budget. Maybe you can make a motion to have staff investigate how other municipalities are dealing with return to service agreements, if they have them, for healthcare professionals. And then second, to have staff connect maybe with the CVSRH navigator, the new navigators, Gina McDonald, to find out about the supports that are needed. So two pieces.
Yep, agreed.
Regular Telile 24/7 viewers might recall that just a few weeks ago we had coverage of information pickets that took place in Arishat and St. Peter's and were held as part of a province-wide day of awareness by the Canadian Union of Public Employees. The CUPE members protesting near St. Anne's Community and Nursing Care Centre and the Richmond Villa in St. Peters were trying to raise awareness of the difficult conditions faced by many who work at long-term care facilities, not just here in the Strait area, but across Nova Scotia. Those concerns were on the top of Amanda Mumberket's mind when the warden of Richmond County brought it back to the table at the latest regular council meeting on Monday. Here's how Warden Mumberket suggested that better data collection at long-term care facilities might be able to help in terms of the concerns that were brought forward by CUPE members just this past month.
So this issue came up at a Villa board meeting maybe earlier this month, might have been the end of last month, but it did come to our attention that currently it's not required or even standard for long-term care facilities to track or report on overtime and sick time at their facilities. The director of the Richmond Villa has been tracking this information, and he presents it to us. And I mean, I think we all sort of agreed at that meeting that it does provide a valuable kind of yardstick on the workload pressures and productivity of staff. And certainly, for me, it's been top of mind. And I know other councillors participated in the province-wide day of action on November 30th. There was events here in St. Peters as well as in Ayrshire, where, long-term care workers are wanting to see issues related to pay, burnout, vacation, time off, because those are clearly pressing issues in the sector. Our discussion at the board meeting was really that, potentially better data on that particular item, overtime and kind of sick time, that type of thing, would maybe even help in better decision-making at the policy and government level. Because right now, I don't think we currently have a provincial understanding of this type of data, or that we fully understand the trend because we're collecting and reporting it in isolation or not at all. So I really just wanted to have a discussion with that at council. I would be interested in maybe writing a letter to our MLA and potentially the Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care to ask questions about that, to see if it could or should become standard kind of data that gets reported. I'm not convinced that it should. It just sounded really smart, as we were having the discussion at the Villa board meeting, but there may be reasons we can't. So we would invite comments from councillors on potentially writing that type of letter at this time.
So I guess I would just say, although I think that type of data has value, I also think that just like the frontline healthcare workers, a lot of the folks in the office area of long-term care facilities are exceptionally overworked. I've, in my other life, doing accounting work, I've worked with many of them. And I know that another report that's required is not usually welcome. So I think we need to be cautious because, sometimes we ask for things, but if they're not easily obtained, and we're advocating for that, we always talk about cost benefit analysis in accounting, right? And is the cost, is that time that it takes folks to do that really have value? What is that report showing? I don't know that we need reports to know that our healthcare system, particularly in long-term care, that the folks who are working in that field are struggling, right? They're struggling, with too much pressure in terms of extra work to do, not enough people to cover their shifts, all of those, not taking their vacation as they should, all of those pieces. So I see value to it. I hesitate to write letters advocating for more reporting when we don't necessarily know if that's what that industry is willing to bear in terms of gathering information. And I guess also, like, what is our role there? Do we have a role? Right. It is a provincial matter, really. And although we do advocate, of course, on many provincial matters, I'm a bit hesitant to advocate.
Yeah. For that. And that's a great point, Deputy Warden. I mean, to my knowledge, I'm sure Carson mentioned this, that there's no system in place to be collecting that data. I don't believe anyway. Maybe the question, maybe it should be a letter asking a question and not necessarily advocating. Like, are there systems in place? Do we have this information in other ways anyway? Like, maybe that's what we could be asking about. I'm just, it just really concerned me that we wouldn't have a sense of a provincial trend in that regard. And also we wouldn't really have a sense of where we are in the scheme of things. Like, is there more pressure here in Cape Breton or in, in this region compared to other regions? And if there is more pressure here, then certainly, that at that point we would be advocating for something, right? So, so that was kind of, I guess, why it raised a red flag with me during that discussion. Okay, so since it's not really an advocacy piece that we're doing, I'll just send an informal request out to our MLA maybe to see what he can find out about that, if folks are okay with that.
However, that didn't come without some concerns raised at the latest regular council meeting on Monday by District 1 Councillor Sean Sampson concerning potential exemptions. Here's how Councillor Sampson framed his concerns about the vaccination policy and what happened in the discussion that followed.
Reading this policy, it says accommodate, right? Like accommodation, so there's a few options there, just, to accommodate. So one's religious, one's medical, and one's the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act, right? So, right. So, but then it goes to say that under the policy part of it, the municipality requires all individuals to be fully vaccinated. That's okay, but then it comes to regardless of their vaccination status, individuals are required to follow all COVID-19 protocols that the municipality has in place. So for me, I don't see, and I'm assuming that they're talking about the accommodation. They're talking about the accommodation part of it, right? So if you got clearance for medical, religious, or the other Nova Scotia Human Rights Act, what would those protocols be? Like, I don't see the protocols in this policy, right?
So those would be public health related protocols. I think we had discussed, right? Like mask wearing, social distancing. If you're in your office, alone, the door closed, you can have your mask off, like that kind of thing, right? Those types of protocols, as opposed to, so those safety protocols are in place at the office, or, some version of them. And then this policy is basically directing people that they have to follow those protocols, whether they're vaccinated or not.
Right. Okay. So whether they're vaccinated or not, right? So yeah. So we're talking about whether vaccinated or not. We're just talking about these 3 accommodations. We're not talking about anybody else, correct?
3 accommodations.
Yeah, just like the medical, the religious, or the
right. But whether they are, whether we, have to provide accommodation because someone can't be vaccinated for a religious reason or not, they still have to follow the protocols.
Right, the protocols, and that's right. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay.
Question?
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sampson, I just want to recognize that you're not in favor of the policy.
Yeah, well, again, point 5 said review of policy, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic will continue to change, right? So to me, we see this changing every day now. And we see that, double vaccinated people are getting the virus, right? So for me, and then I think the rubber is going to hit the road when it comes to all these boosters. And listening to some of my residents and some of my concerns, I don't know if we want to move this forward right now or give it a couple of weeks of the holiday break. Our kids are out of school right now, and for me, I'd like to see a couple of weeks down the road to see where this Omicron virus takes us and where we're going to go from here. But
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll note that objection, Councillor. But the motion is carried to adopt the policy.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure, we can revisit down the road if we feel the need to. So.
Of course, no conversation about health care here in Richmond County or across Nova Scotia can take place without talking about COVID-19. And Richmond Municipal Council has developed a new vaccination strategy for its municipal employees in Arishat and across the county. We're going to spend the next few minutes here on Telile 24/7 talking about volunteer fire departments in Richmond County. Now, you might recall on an earlier episode this month, we had footage of Richmond Council's Committee of the Whole, in which there was a discussion on whether Richmond should charge a single fire rate for the whole county, as opposed to the different rates charged in different communities, as is done right now. There's been some investigation by Richmond officials to the municipalities of Inverness County, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, and the town of Port Hawkesbury to see how they do it. And at Monday's recent regular meeting of Richmond County, Council decided to ask staff to take a look at the municipality of Pictou County to see specifically how that municipality deals with its various communities and their fire departments. But there's also been some development on the issue of dry hydrants for Richmond County. It's a concern that's been brought forth by various volunteer fire departments in the county, as well as the Strait Area Mutual Aid Association. Well, it turns out that Richmond County is very close to being able to bring forward a dry hydrant policy to be able to deal with these issues. But there's still some discussion that's going to be happening going forward, as you'll hear in this clip from the latest regular council meeting featuring Deputy Warden Melanie Sampson, whose District 3 takes in West Bay Road and other areas that have brought up concerns about dry hydrants.
As I wasn't at the bylaw policy meeting where we did finalize this, I guess I did listen to the recording of it and did review the minutes. And I have a little bit of a concern in terms of the area where we talk about hydrant and site maintenance, and how that our role in that would be to provide administrative support to access engineering and permitting for maintenance projects. So I just want to say that I know there was considerable discussion, and I understand that the majority is in favor of that. The conversations I've had with the fire departments is they would like a little more than administrative support when it comes to those pieces. I'm happy to see that they're getting more than that in regards to the installation of the hydrants. So I think that that's really great. And I think that it'll be a bit before we get to some maintenance. And so we have some time to think on that and perhaps make changes or see how it pans out when we have our first maintenance project. But I guess I just wanted to say, although I will be voting in favor of this policy, that I have some reservations about that section. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Warden. And I think that's a great observation. It was something we really struggled to figure out what is the right balance. But I think at the end of the day, we all agree that this policy is a starting point, and we're going to learn from it as we go. So to your point, yeah.
Yeah, and like, to piggyback on Deputy Warden's comment, I felt the same way, that they were looking for definitely more support, but we all to move it forward and to get it up and running, we'd start with this, and we could always make adjustments along the way if required.
Well, it's almost Christmas, and you know what that means. Yes, it's time for the Christmas poems to come out, and for the second year in a row, Richmond District 5 Councillor Brent Sampson has decided to dust off his rhyming dictionary and share a poem that looks back on the last 12 months of Richmond Municipal Council. Not just some of the amusing things, but also some pretty serious stories that Richmond Council had to deal with. So let's listen in to Poet Laureate of Richmond County, Brent Sampson himself, as the District 5 Councillor gives his take on A Visit from St. Nicholas.
All right. Well,
All right.
I'm not sure if this delivery will be the same through Zoom, but case counts what they are. I guess we have to all deal with what's going on here. So, it was the week before Christmas. Now, at our last meeting, I figured it was time to write a new greeting. COVID had gotten us all sick and tired. That's not to say lots of things hadn't transpired. A union was formed after our budget cuts. The amount spent on lawyers may drive some folks nuts. A strategic plan will be coming quite soon. This should put Warden Amanda over the moon. Meetings on meetings are keeping us busy. Some are important and some make you dizzy. We have a new deputy who sits beside me. She represents residents all the way to Dundee. Michael and Sean wrote their letters to St. Nick. A campground on the island is their #1 pick. Don and Yvonne keep things running well. When trouble arises, they answer the bell. May you all enjoy the holidays with the utmost delight. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Well done. I'm starting to look forward to that more than I care to admit.
No reference to the tie this year, right, Sean?
Hey, yeah, that's right. Hey, first thing you know, you'll be in Boston with Roger Cousin.
questions for Councillor Brent Sampson on his Christmas message.
I love how he never refers to himself.
Right?
I feel
We're
like
gonna have to
we
put
need a
addendum,
rebuttal rhyme. You know what I mean? Like a rebuttal rhyme for
an
that.
addendum for next
All
year.
right, I'll take that into consideration, Deputy Warden.
All right, thank you so much, Councillor Brent Sampson, for providing a little levity in what is a kind of a long agenda, I recognize, in our last meeting before Christmas. Thank you so much.
And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thanks once again to my interview guest this week, the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs for Nova Scotia, John Lohr, and thank you for tuning in. If you have any thoughts about what you've heard over the past hour, or you'd just like to make some suggestions for future editions of Telile 24/7, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and the best email address to use is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television with your thoughts on the station's programming, as well as suggestions for future shows. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email to use is info@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And our YouTube channel features every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as our sister programs Roundtable and Notre Côté, and the internet-only local analysis for COVID-19 briefings being held here in Nova Scotia. I'm Adam Cooke. Thank you for tuning in to Telile 24/7 this year. We'll have a special year in review edition for 2021 coming up next week on the program. In the meantime, whatever you celebrate at this time of year, I wish you and your family the very happiest of holidays. And let's all stay safe and pull through together to get through to the new year in fine form. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.